When S.T.A.L.K.E.R was first revealed in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 by his own dedicated trailer, people quickly pointed out that the character had changed quite a lot compared to his original version from Clear Sky. They turned out to be correct, but the game actually provided reasons for this, which go much deeper than anyone could have anticipated. That's right, it is time to take a look at S.T.A.L.K.E.R and everything related to him. Spark, Clear Sky, the Shining Zone, and even more that cannot be spoken yet. Indeed, the video will contain heavy spoilers. You've been warned. The character of S.T.A.L.K.E.R in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is much more complex than what appears at first glance, but you will need to dig deep into the game's story and its secrets to realize it. On the surface, S.T.A.L.K.E.R looks like an eccentric man who doesn't hesitate to get his hands dirty to destroy the plans of S.T.A.L.K.E.R and the world. The way he talks is cryptic, and his actions may seem crazy to those who don't know the full extent of his plans, that is, basically everyone else. Despite that, he has accumulated a strong following in the form of the Spark faction, a large group of experienced stalkers who hate the world and whose goal is to find the Shining Zone, a reality in which the zone is a beautiful and welcoming place instead of a dangerous and radioactive wasteland. This is the most basic rundown of the character, but before we can go further, I think it is important to remind ourselves about the story of S.T.A.L.K.E.R before S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, as depicted in the game S.T.A.L.K.E.R Clear Sky. Originally, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was a mercenary, but not like the ones from the mercenary faction. He was more of a loner kind of merc, a hired gun with experience of the zone, if you will. His story began as he was guiding a group of scientists through the swamps in September 2011. Their expedition was interrupted by an unpredicted emission, which was triggered by S.T.A.L.K.E.R and his crew during their first trip inside the CNPP sarcophagus. S.T.A.L.K.E.R miraculously survived the emission, and his unconscious body was picked up by the Clear Sky faction, who brought him to their base and treated his wounds. Clear Sky was a very secretive group hiding deep in the swamps, led by veteran scientists Lebedev, Kaloncha and Suslov. Documents from Call of Pripyat revealed that these three had been working in the X-Labs prior to the emergence of the anomalous zone, explaining their extensive knowledge on the matter. However, it should be said that the average member of the faction did not know about their leader's ulterior motives and plans. All they knew was the main philosophy of Clear Sky, which can be summarized in this way. The zone cannot be destroyed, therefore its mechanisms must be studied in order to improve its inevitable coexistence with humans. The men were well fed and well paid, so they respected their superiors and carried out their orders efficiently without asking any further questions. Anyway, S.T.A.L.K.E.R woke up and was filled in on the situation by Lebedev, who sent him to assist a Clear Sky outpost that came under attack. During the rescue mission, another blowout suddenly occurred, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R once again survived. The Clear Sky scientists couldn't explain this incredible ability of his, but they determined that S.T.A.L.K.E.'s nervous system would eventually fry if the emissions kept popping up at the current rate. Indeed, the zone was becoming more and more unstable, a situation that could result in a great disaster. Clear Sky took upon themselves to avoid that outcome, so they started to investigate with S.T.A.L.K.E.R on their side. Lebedev speculated that the zone was reacting to an intrusion in its center, and after a few adventures in the zone, S.T.A.L.K.E.R discovered that he was correct. S.T.A.L.K.E.R had managed to reach the power plant and he was planning to go there again. S.T.A.L.K.E.R chased after the legendary Stalker and his crew, composed of Ghost and Fong, but S.T.A.L.K.E.R had a plan. He acquired a Psi protection helmet from the scientists to pass through the brain scorcher, and blew up a tunnel leading to the center right behind him so that he couldn't be followed. As a result, Clear-Sky was forced to make a detour via the lost town of Limansk, and most of the faction's members took part in a campaign to cross the city and make it all the way to the power plant. In the end, they managed to get there at the same time as S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and S.K.E.R disabled the Stalker's Psi protection. Lebedev believed this would be enough to avoid the disaster, but the zone reacted differently from what he had foreseen, triggering an emission that supposedly wiped out almost all of Clear-Sky. For a long time, the fate of S.K.E.R, Lebedev and the other members of the faction remained unknown. We learned of only 2 people who survived from the Clear-Sky gang: Nimble, who came to work for Sidorovich and later became a trader of unique goods, and Novikov, who was hired as a technician at the scientist's mobile lab near Yanev. Meanwhile, all sorts of wild theories circulated about what happened to the others, but many of these were put to rest with the new information that released in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Let's take a look. First and foremost, S.K.E.R didn't die. He wasn't turned into a monolithian either, like some people claimed. No, he came back a changed man, his memories of the Clear-Sky days long gone, and a new hatred for the world burning inside him. However, the truth about what really went down with S.K.E.R was only revealed at the very end of the game, so we will come back to it in due time. Focusing on Clear-Sky for now, we can learn interesting things about it directly from the mouth of Nimble, who was hired by Faust to guide his men to their old base lost deep in the swamps. Nimble claims that he was the sole survivor of the faction's expedition to the CNPP, which means he did take part in the trip to stop S.T.A.L.K.E.R, but was the only one to make it back. Moreover, Professor Kalancha was not part of the operation. He had remained at the base, most likely accompanied by a few other members, such as Novikov. After their main forces disappeared at the center of the zone along with their leader Lebedev, the remaining men disbanded and left the base. Thus, Kalancha set up Psi beacons all over the swamps in order to prevent any intrusions on their territory while they were gone. In his final message to the Clear-Sky personnel, he mentions that they might return one day, but obviously this never happened, and Kalancha's current whereabouts remain a mystery. So at the time of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, the Clear-Sky group was gone for almost a decade, but the Spark faction became in some ways like a spiritual successor to Clear-Sky. In order to understand how that's the case, let's take a look at the origins and history of Spark. The root of the faction goes back to 2012, during the events of Call of Pripyat, when Dektyarov helped out the scientists from the lab near Yanev and their hired S.T.A.L.K.E.R assistants. The official staff was composed of Professor Herman, the head of the expedition, and Professor Ozersky. Additionally, they hired Novikov as their technician, and a crew of local stalkers to help with the field tasks. They were Topol, Mace, Snake, and Spirit. After Dektyarov saved the men from a controller attack and provided invaluable help with other scientific endeavors, Herman's expedition became a huge success, and Topol's team was promoted to official members of the scientific community, with permit to stay in the zone and all. They became the S.T.A.L.K.E.R Scientific Research and Investigation Team, in other words, the first Spark group, because S.T.A.L.K.E.R means spark. Shortly after, a stalker named Marshall woke up inside the bunker, with no recollection of his previous memories. It is very much possible he was a monolithian who was freed from the brainwashing a bit later than the others. After all, Spirit was a former monolithian himself. In any case, the team adopted Marshall as one of their own and took good care of him. Marshall wanted to return the favor, so when he stumbled upon the chemical plant during one of his trips, he proposed that S.T.A.L.K.E.R move there, and that's exactly what they did. I suppose there are a few reasons for this to make sense. Firstly, the original S.T.A.L.K.E.R bunker was eventually abandoned, because the scientists moved on to other projects. Herman went to work for S.T.A.L.K.E.R, while Ozerski became the director of S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Secondly, the S.T.A.L.K.E.R group was expanding, since we know of old members like Squint, for example. Still, these things could have happened after S.T.A.L.K.E.R moved to the chemical plant, but if so, they did very shortly afterwards, meaning Marshall could have called the move exactly because he was anticipating them to happen. Either way, S.T.A.L.K.E.R made their new base in the chemical plant, from where they kept a low profile and continued to work for scientists. Until one day, BAM BAM BAM! The Ward came along and decided to take the chemical plant for themselves. According to Squint, they gave Sparkers 15 minutes to grab their gear and get the hell out. Past the delay, they launched their assault, killing everyone without mercy. Well, almost everyone. Topol was the first to die. Then Mace, who tried to warn the others but couldn't do anything but wheeze. Meanwhile, Marshall and Spirit were trying to escape through the workshop, when the second assault squad burst in. Thankfully for them, Snake had a grenade ready for them, and sacrificed himself to buy enough time for his friends to get away. "Thieves rule and wardens drool," were his last words. In the end, only a handful managed to survive the attack, who were those who bailed out instantly, like Squint, plus Marshall and Spirit. As for the Ward, they kept control of the chemical plant ever since, taking advantage of its strategic position within the zone to enforce their regime. The exact date of the fateful assault on the chemical plant is unknown, but it is pretty clear that it happened sometime in 2013, since this is the year the Ward arrived in the zone. Following the debacle, Marshall and Spirit split up to avoid the Wardens. Marshall went to the north and disappeared, never to be seen again. Sometime later, S.T.A.L.K.E.R resurfaced, determined to rebuild S.T.A.L.K.E.R and avenge those killed by the Ward. He utilized the hatred that had been boiling within the stalker community since that fateful night at the chemical plant, amassing a strong following of new sparkers itching to take on the Ward. Moreover, S.T.A.L.K.E.R heard about the legend of the Shining Zone, which S.T.A.L.K.E.R briefly saw when he went to the center. From then on, the goals of the Spark faction became clear: destroy the Ward and find the Shining Zone. In order to achieve the latter, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was helping scientists. Not Circa, of course, but rather Malachite. They had history with Ozerski after all. They studied the zone and its secrets looking for the Shining, which mirrors Clear Sky's own research and quest to improve humanity's coexistence with the zone. However, the true parallel between the two groups, S.T.A.L.K.E.R and Clear Sky, lies within whoever was really controlling them. Indeed, it turns out that S.T.A.L.K.E.R is actually an agent of C consciousness, and Clear Sky was working directly for the common consciousness as well. You see, when S.T.A.L.K.E.R stopped S.T.A.L.K.E.R at the CNPP during the Clear Sky raid back in 2011, both he and S.T.A.L.K.E.R were captured and taken to the Neuro Laboratory to be programmed as agents of C consciousness. We know what happened to S.T.A.L.K.E.R. There was a glitch in his programming, so when he was sent back to the zone he didn't follow his orders properly, and ended up coming back to the center and destroyed the C consciousness. And that's when he caught a glimpse of the Shining Zone. The case of S.T.A.L.K.E.R, on the other hand, he is quite different. But first and foremost, Let's go back to the beginning by taking a close look at the secret documents found by Skif at the old S.T.A.L.K.E.R base. The first note is nothing special, but it reveals that Nimble was the one who rescued S.T.A.L.K.E.R from the swamps after the huge blowout of September 2011. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, but the truth is that S.T.A.L.K.E.R's appearance in this place at this time was no coincidence. Communication session recordings, the protocols of comms sessions from the time when sea consciousness was still active, recorded using the visiograph setup in Kalancha's laboratory. From September 3, 2011, sent by Valentin Dalin, the representative of sea consciousness. In response to your earlier inquiry, as of September 2011, the anomalous energy emanating from the noosphere remains unstable. The so-called emissions are a consequence of these ongoing fluctuations. Continue monitoring and collecting data. Answer from Kalancha. Understood, we'll continue our observations. From September 10, 2011, the day when S.T.A.L.K.E.R woke up at clear sky, sent by Valentin Dalin. To ensure the successful execution of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R initiative, you are required to accept Agent AMS-017 into the group and continuously monitor his activity. Should any instability arise in his neuroprogramming, the agent must be compelled to seek out and terminate stalker ALS-013. Answer from Lebedev. Acknowledged. Initiating monitoring. So here's the scoop. S.T.A.L.K.E.R had been working under the orders of sea consciousness all along. They were aware of the reasons behind the instability of the zone at that time, and they straight up lied to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, manipulating him into helping them in order to stop S.T.A.L.K.E.R. Indeed, AMS-017 refers to mercenary S.T.A.L.K.E.R, while ALS-013 refers to loner S.T.A.L.K.E.R. We do not know what the S.T.A.L.K.E.R initiative is, but I suspect it could be the plan to stop S.T.A.L.K.E.R and restore stability to the noosphere. Moreover, the representative directly calls S.T.A.L.K.E.R one of their agents, and reveals that he received neuroprogramming, which means S.T.A.L.K.E.R did not just become an agent at the end of Clear Sky. He was an agent all along, even before he came to the swamps. As you can imagine, this changes everything. There was always suspicions and fan-made theories about Clear Sky's shady nature, with some even claiming that they were cooperating with sea consciousness. But I never really believed it, because there were too many things that did not make sense with this narrative. The developers' initial intent with Clear Sky was to make them a group of Project X scientists who had gone rogue and cut ties with sea consciousness, which in my opinion was a more interesting background for the faction. However, the new GSC decided to canonize the crazy fan-made theories, making it official that Clear Sky was controlled by sea consciousness all along. The fact that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was an agent from the very beginning is also a big surprise, but it explains why Lebedev was able to recruit him so easily. It gives a whole new perspective on things when you replay Clear Sky, I'll tell you that much. Anyway, we have one last document to look at, Lebedev's last order to Nimble. MDST is done. The Ensile Scientist Protection Project has been compromised. I have one last job for you. Find any information on two stalkers who go by Fong and Ghost, while S.T.A.L.K.E.R is looking for S.T.A.L.K.E.R. If you find them, eliminate them. Good luck. This message must have been sent at the time when S.T.A.L.K.E.R found out about S.T.A.L.K.E.'s whereabouts from his stash in Agroprom, around the middle of the storyline from the Clear Sky game. Indeed, at this moment Lebedev tasked S.T.A.L.K.E.R to go after S.T.A.L.K.E.R and declared, "We'll take care of Fang and Ghost." The mystery behind Fong's death has already been discussed in great length before, and unlike what some people claim, this order does not confirm that Nimble was the one who shot him. Nimble is not known for killing his fellow stalkers, so he could very well have hired someone else to do the job. Besides, if he really joined S.T.A.L.K.E.R's expedition to the center like he claims, there is a good chance he didn't find Ghost and Fong in the first place. Anyway, I am more interested in MDST and the S.T.A.L.K.E.R Scientist Protection Project mentioned by Lebedev. MDST was the Ministry of Defense and Secret Technologies, which oversaw the lab experiments carried out in the zone. The name suggests that it was originally a government entity, most certainly from Soviet times, but it remained active even after the fall of the Soviet Union, and also after the second Chernobyl disaster. By this point, MDST designated the group of scientists still working on Project X. It may have lost its original meaning, but the name stuck. Following the birth of the zone in 2006 and the formation of C consciousness, official support for the experiments was abandoned, and Project X was terminated. However, MDST carried on unofficially under the supervision of Common Consciousness, and the scientists were given a choice to either leave the project or join MDST and maintain their positions. For example, Professor Dvupalov decided to leave, while his colleagues Shubko and Kvalin continued to work in X5 and eventually completed the Controller project for the benefit of C consciousness. Considering their ties with the entity's representative, it can be assumed that Lebedev, Kalonsha and Suslov also joined MDST, and they were given the mission to operate under the cover of the Clear Sky faction. As far as I know, we don't have any information about the S.T.A.L.K.E.R Scientist Protection Project, but it sounds like it was something that allowed MDST to continue its operations in safety even after it was officially shut down. According to an ancient Roman legend, the S.T.A.L.K.E.R was a divine shield that fell from the heavens. Word was that Rome would remain on top of the world as long as the shield was preserved. Therefore, 11 other decoy shields were crafted in order to ensure the safety of the one true S.T.A.L.K.E.R. This description fits the idea of a C consciousness program that would use deception and even possibly Psi technologies in order to protect MDST and its scientists. Anyway, Lebedev's message suggests this project would have been compromised sometime in late 2011, leading to the end of MDST, but I cannot think of any particular event that would have led to this. Of course, the zone was unstable during the timeline of Clear Sky, but nothing really threatened C consciousness and MDST at the time. Yes, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was starting to become a problem, but he was still far from uncovering the truth, and S.T.A.L.K.E.R was on the case. So something else must have happened that we don't know about, which resulted in the demise of MDST. Or did it? In S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, there is information proving that MDST was still active during the year 2013, meaning it would have survived the crisis hinted at by Lebedev. In fact, it is finally time to take a look at S.T.A.L.K.E.R's programming. Or reprogramming, I suppose. According to his file, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was born in 1979 and was originally a mercenary, stubborn, reckless and working well under pressure. What really made him special though was his natural class 5 Psi protection, which allowed him to survive high doses of anomalous energy and even emissions. When S.T.A.L.K.E.R was abducted by MDST after the ending of Clear Sky, he was reframed in the Neural Laboratory, meaning he was reprogrammed and given new objectives, which we'll dig into in a moment. On top of that, MDST performed a memory transfer from Marshall's brain into Scar's mind, basically replacing his own memories with Marshall's. This implementation of key memories, such as the assault on the chemical plant and the death of the original S.T.A.L.K.E.R members, resulted in the creation of a deep hatred for the world within the new Scar. Furthermore, he also acquired other personality traits from Marshall, such as interpersonal skills and exuberance, which is why his behavior in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 seems so different from his version from Clear Sky, not to mention the fact that his mind became unstable, as highlighted by both Valentin Darlin and his secret file. The body that Scar is fiddling with in the neural laboratory at the end of the game is none other than Marshall's, whose corpse remained here to rot after his mind was dumped into Scar's brain. The screen shows the memories of that fateful night at the chemical plant, and indicates the date of September 17, 2013. It is unclear whether this is the date of the world's attack on S.T.A.L.K.E.R or the date of the memory injection, but in both cases it means that the operation was performed in 2013 at the earliest, therefore after the destruction of C consciousness by S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and also after the supposed demise of MDST. Therefore, we can conclude that MDST actually still existed at this time in some capacity, and it is even possible that former Clear Sky scientists were responsible for reprogramming Scar. So let's summarize what happened so far. Scar was once a mercenary who got brainwashed by C consciousness to track down and eliminate S.T.A.L.K.E.R. He stumbled upon the Clear Sky faction in September 2011, and they teamed up, eventually stopping S.T.A.L.K.E.R right at the CNPP. Both Scar and S.T.A.L.K.E.R were taken to the Neuro Laboratory, but while the Stalker became an agent and was sent back into the zone, Scar remained in stasis for a long time. Even after S.T.A.L.K.E.R came back and destroyed C consciousness in 2012, Scar's body was still conserved somewhere in secret. In 2013, an OG Sparker named Marshall survived the Warden attack on the chemical plant and went to the north. Somehow, he ended up captured by MDST and was brought to the Neuro Laboratory. There, they decided to finally revive Scar and transfer Marshall's memories into him, as a way to make Scar an ally of S.T.A.L.K.E.R and the #1 hater of the world. Whoever was behind this had a plan, the goal of which was revealed during the main quest. Valentin Darlin, the leader of C consciousness, believed in the existence of subtle matter, a way to exist within the noosphere in the form of pure consciousness, even after one's physical death. If he was correct, this means that the scientists from Common Consciousness could have survived in the subtle world despite being gunned down by S.T.A.L.K.E.R. I think those who reframed Scar also believed in this theory, and their goal was to find a way to bring C consciousness back in business. In order to achieve this, they left Scar a precise list of instructions that can be read directly from his PDA. Reframe instructions from MDST. 1. Locate an alpha artifact or recruit a person to bring it to S.T.A.L.K.E.R and keep them under control. 2. An alpha artifact is needed in X11 to restore the functionality of the X network. 3. Use our beta station to recruit scientists. 4. Assemble a working visiograph at STC Malachite X17 using modules found in the zone. 5. Activate the visiograph. 6. Await further instructions. When S.T.A.L.K.E.R dealt with the C consciousness, he also destroyed a central node of the X network, shutting down the whole system in the process. This meant that Project X installations located at the various labs and facilities scattered in the zone could not be used anymore. Since these contraptions were of crucial importance to the goals of C consciousness and MDST, SCAR's first task was to find a way to restart the X network, and that way was through the Alpha artifact. Lab X11 underneath S.T.A.L.K.E.R contained a special podium built specifically for the artifact that would grant power back to the network. It is interesting to point out that all major forces within the zone wanted to bring an Alpha to X11, but for different reasons. Agatha aimed to remotely connect to the generators, S.T.A.L.K.E.R wanted to restart the X network, and Faust wished to bring back the monolith. With all sides looking to deliver an Alpha artifact to S.T.A.L.K.E.R, it was bound to happen sooner or later. This explains why S.T.A.L.K.E.R was ready to help Skif in his quest, and also why he assisted Faust by providing him with psi-emitters. The next step, using Orbita to recruit scientists, is illustrated by an audio recording found in the station's basement. The conversation reveals that S.T.A.L.K.E.R brought Professor Ozerski to the pod in Lab X15. There, the director of Malachite saw and talked to Topol, the original leader of S.P.A.R.K., who died during the Warden attack on the chemical plant. Later on, the same pod was used by Skif to test the subtle matter theory, and that's when he talked to Strider, who was also dead by that time. The whole point of this is to convince that subtle matter is real, and that afterlife within the noosphere does indeed exist. However, the game makes it unclear if this is actually true, or if it's all an induced illusion projected by psi devices, and it is up to Skif and the player to choose what to believe. The subtle matter debate deserves a video of its own, and we don't have time to cover it right now, so for the moment I will not pick a side and leave things ambiguous. Regardless, Ozerski was convinced by the meeting with Topol, and that's why he started to work with S.T.A.L.K.E.R and S.P.A.R.K. behind S.T.A.L.K.E.'s back. Moving on, Step 4 calls for assembling a visiograph in X17, using parts taken from the zone. This is where the alliance with Ozerski comes in handy, since X17 is located underneath STC Malachite. Moreover, S.T.A.L.K.E.R became known for being an expert in psi technologies and at salvaging all devices from the X labs, skills he most likely acquired after many years spent looking for documents and parts related to the visiograph. In the end, S.P.A.R.K. located the precious schematics of the device, called Product 81, within Laboratory X18. Skif will witness this firsthand if he sided with Richter in the Lesser Zone. A nice detail is that if Skif does not find the blueprints, S.T.A.L.K.E.R comments that his men will have to go back there and retrieve them, explaining how S.P.A.R.K. gets their hands on the documents regardless of Skif's actions. Anyway, S.T.A.L.K.E.R found all the necessary components and the visiograph was assembled around the middle part of the main quest. One thing we can notice is that S.T.A.L.K.E.'s instructions are very bare-bone and lack a lot of details that could have helped him. For example, they do not mention the fact that a special key is required to launch the visiograph, and that key is held by Faust as a pendant. Perhaps the orders were printed more clearly into S.T.A.L.K.E.'s subconsciousness, and the PDA message is just here to remind him of the main steps in his journey. Regardless, he eventually did figure out that Faust had what he needed, at least if Skif chooses to side with Strider during the events at S.T.A.L.K.E.R. In this case, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will ask Skif to eliminate Faust and retrieve his necklace, then to bring it to X17 so that the visiograph can be activated. On the occasion that Skif sided with the Ward instead, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will still be able to build the visiograph, but he won't be there during its activation, for it will be Dalin that brings Skif to the location along with Faust's pendant. In the end, the two paths don't make much of a difference for the purpose of the present video, because Skif will be the one to witness the event from the front row. Through the visiograph appeared the representative of C consciousness, Dalin. He proceeded to explain the theory about subtle matter, and claimed that they continued to live within the noosphere after S.T.A.L.K.E.R destroyed their bodies. More importantly, he revealed the truth about the Shining Zone.
After the reckless intervention by S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the structure of the noosphere was damaged, isolating individual subtle matter images from one another. The Shining will reinstate the right to immortality for all sentient beings in the zone, and eventually, for all of mankind. From then on, our liberated consciousnesses will gain the ability to communicate directly with one another, facilitating the free exchange of knowledge and experience. It will be the dawn of a new age.
According to the representative, people who died in the zone used to live forever in interconnection within the noosphere, but this changed after S.T.A.L.K.E.R fucked up the second Caribbean experiment. Now the dead remain isolated within their own personal limbo, just like we see with Strider. The Shining is now the main project of C consciousness, aimed at first restoring afterlife for all stalkers within the zone, and second, to expand it to the entire human race. Per his instructions, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was supposed to receive further orders from the representative right here and there, so that the Shining can be achieved. However, this won't happen, either due to the fact that S.T.A.L.K.E.R wasn't even there, or because of the Warden attack that disrupts the visiograph. In order to discover what these orders were, we need to follow the path of the spark ending, in which case another conversation can be had with the representative at the Foundation. There we can learn even more details of C Consciousness's plan, such as the information about MDST and the agents. Dalin will also reveal that S.T.A.L.K.E.R's true purpose is to serve as a mediator for C consciousness to reconnect to the generators and finally achieve the Shining. Indeed, S.T.A.L.K.E.'s actions severed the connection and prevented further action from C consciousness. Now that the heart of the X network in the Foundation had been restored, all that was left was for S.T.A.L.K.E.R to enter the 8th pod at the generators, fulfilling his purpose as a mediator. He was chosen for this task because he has Class 5 Psi protection, which is a mandatory requirement to become a mediator. Regardless of who Skif chooses to side with, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will find his way to the Neuro Laboratory and learn the truth about what really happened to him. In case Skif didn't believe in the Shining Zone, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will turn insane from discovering that he was a puppet all along. Then it's up to us to take him out of his misery. However, if Skif followed the path of the Shining, S.T.A.L.K.E.R will fulfill his destiny by stepping into the pod and acting as the C consciousness's mediator, finally bringing the Shining. Or so it first appears. But the analysis of the endings is meant for another time. Alright, it's time to recap everything. S.T.A.L.K.E.R was brainwashed first time by C consciousness before the events of Clear Sky. When he met the Clear Sky faction, they manipulated him to stop S.T.A.L.K.E.R and chased the Stalker all the way to the CNPP. There, S.T.A.L.K.E.R was taken once again to be brainwashed, but for some reason he remained in stasis. After C consciousness was destroyed, Someone from MDST elaborated a plan to bring them back, since they believed in afterlife in the noosphere via subtle matter. S.T.A.L.K.E.R was reframed with the memories of the OG Sparker Marshall, giving him a deep hatred for the world and a desire to search for the Shining Zone. Following his instructions, S.T.A.L.K.E.R worked to restart the X network and activate a visiograph, through which C consciousness could be interacted with. This was meant to inform him about the true nature of the Shining and his purpose as a mediator, with the final steps being to restart the Foundation and step into the empty 8th pod. The Class 5 Psi protection would be enough to allow C consciousness to control the noosphere through S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and therefore make the Shining a reality. In the end, S.T.A.L.K.E.R's character turned out to be more interesting than anticipated, due to the depth of his backstory, and while he seems unlikable for a lot of players at first, he became a much more sympathetic NPC by the end, due to the tragic nature of his narrative arc. S.T.A.L.K.E.R was never himself to begin with, always a puppet working for a greater purpose that he never even chose. I hope this video allowed you to learn more about S.T.A.L.K.E.R and everything related to him, and hopefully understand the story of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 a bit better. As for me, it is time to sign off, so take care and good luck.